Open up the Imrei Yaakov. Sorry for the delay. My computer's just very sluggish this morning. Something must be downloading in the background or something. Just bringing up the text. Okay. All right, there we go. Okay. So we're going to go on to Sif Yud Beis today. Close the door. Okay. In order for us to learn this halacha properly, I have to set up a couple of ideas that are assumed that the reader knows when he reads this halacha. The first thing is that there's a halacha called ona'ah. The Torah says, lo tonu isha sachiv, that one man may not oppress his brother. And the Torah writes this twice in the same portion. And as we'll learn later on in Siman Bet, when we learn the laws of ona'ah, because that's really the next chapter, and we're almost at the end of chapter 1, so I guess this is sort of leading up to chapter 2. The laws of ona'ah state two things, because it's written twice in the Torah. One is that a very simple halacha, you may not verbally assault someone by saying something to them that will cause them pain. That's a biblical prohibition of ona'ah, of oppression or assault in a non-physical way. The second prohibition of ona'ah, which has more halachic text written about it, because it's a more technical halacha, is financial ona'ah, is financial oppression. And what that means is that you're not allowed to exploit someone's ignorance in order to make money off of them in a way that is onerous. And so what that essentially means is that if you're involved in commercial exchange with another Jew, there's a Torah prohibition for you to rip him off, in the sense that if there's a commodity with a fixed price and you sell it to him for a value that is wildly above the standard price for that fixed commodity, so then you're guilty of ona'ah. Similarly, if that's if you're a seller. If you're a purchaser, you can be guilty of ona'ah if you underpay by a certain percentage, which we'll see is 1/6 of the market value. If you pay less than 1/6 of one of the fair market value, let's say something is worth $6 and you pay only $5, so then you're guilty of ona'ah. And that's again when you are exploiting the ignorance of the seller because he doesn't know what the fair market value is. If you disclose to him fair market value, and you as two consenting parties, a seller and a buyer, are in agreement that that's what the object should be sold for, and the seller is willing to give you a discount for whatever reason, so then there's no longer ona'ah. Ona'ah, by definition, is taking advantage of somebody else's lack of knowledge at the particular moment of what the financial value is. Okay? So what's important to know is that there are certain halachos that are involved in finance that apply exclusively between two Jews. There are other laws of finance that apply to both Jews and non-Jews. So here's an example. A law that applies to both Jews and non-Jews is, for example, the prohibition of theft. Okay, you're not allowed to steal from someone, whether or not they're Jewish or non-Jewish. and anything that is proactive, that is offensive against the person, you're not allowed to do. But ona'ah is not considered one of those things where you have an obligation to disclose to a Gentile what the true market value of an object is, because there we say that when it comes to between Jewish and non-Jewish relations, caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. In other words, it's the buyer or seller's responsibility when engaging in commercial exchange to do their due diligence and not to buy or sell unless they know fully what is being disclosed to them, or the true price of the object. What would be prohibited for a Jew to do to a Gentile would be to do anything deceptive, to misrepresent the value of an object, or to misrepresent the true weight or the true quality of a product. So for example, if a Jew is a used car salesman and he paints over the rust to misrepresent the car as being in excellent condition when it's in really terrible condition, right? So then that's a prohibition of ona'ah, or really of genevas das, of deception, that applies to Jew and non-Jew alike. But as far as if you're selling a completely good product and there's a fixed price on that product, and the Gentile has not done his due diligence, and you offer him a much higher price than what the object is worth, then you have the right to do that to a non-Jew, because it's up to the non-Jew to figure out what the true value is. Now, we're not talking about where the person is of limited mental capacity or anything like that. That would be malicious, and that would be a terrible thing. But we're talking about where the person has the responsibility to know what the value is. Now, the question, of course, is why is there a difference in halacha between Jews and non-Jews in this area? The difference, why there's a difference in halacha, is because this is considered to be not in the realm of justice. This is considered to be in the realm of above and beyond justice. Above and beyond justice is what God says, I want you to treat your fellow Jew like he's a member of your family. And just like you wouldn't take advantage of a family member's ignorance about the market, you should also not take advantage of a fellow Jew's ignorance about the market. But a stranger, someone who's not part of your community, someone who's not a fellow Jew, and you're engaging in commercial exchange, then everyone who wishes to come to market has to do their due diligence. And therefore, you're under no obligation to make sure that he knows what the fair market value is. If he wants to do business with you, you have a right to charge whatever you want, and he has a right to pay whatever he wants. And that's and vice versa. If he's selling and you're buying, then it's up to him to know what his object is worth, what he would like for it, and you're under no obligation to disclose to him what the fair market value is. That's really up to him to set the price. Any questions at this point? Any concerns?
Is there no issue of being a Chilul Hashem?
There sometimes is an issue of Chilul Hashem, and as we'll see, we will get to that issue of Chilul Hashem or Kiddush Hashem later on. We're going to talk about that. But what I'm talking about is when you can assess that there's no Kiddush Hashem, there's no Chilul Hashem involved for whatever reason, the circumstance that you're involved with is at the time. It's an excellent point, Eddie. And as we'll see, it is a mitzvah to make a Kiddush Hashem whenever possible. So if you have the opportunity to make a Kiddush Hashem, then and to let the guy know, listen, sir, you're willing to pay a lot of money for this item, but it's really not worth as much as you think it is. So then that's a tremendous Kiddush Hashem, especially if he sees you're wearing a kippah and so forth. Or you tell him, I'm a Jew and I want you to know that I am concerned about you. So whenever you can make a Kiddush Hashem, that would override this law of ona'ah, and that's an important caveat to point out. Now, as a corollary of this, there is also a halacha of ta'us akum, or ta'us nachri, that if a Gentile makes a mistake based on his own error, not based on anything that I do to mislead the Gentile. It is usher for me to mislead or misrepresent to a non-Jew. That's called Geneva, because Genevas das, deception, is the same kind of thievery as actually taking something from someone when it's rightfully theirs. So if I do anything to deceive someone, I'm guilty of Genevas das, and it's a form of theft. If, however, I don't make the mistake, and it's the Gentile's mistake on his own, so then that's called ta'us nachri. And if a Gentile gives me more money than I had asked for, and he gives that money to me without my asking him or representing in any way or misrepresenting in any way, then technically the halacha states that I'm allowed to keep that money and I do not have to notify the non-Jew of the error that he made. However, once again, the poskim say that whenever you can make a Kiddush Hashem, you're obligated to notify the Gentile that he's made a mistake and return the overpay, for example. So in a situation where, let's say, for example, the guy thinks that he's giving me a $10 bill and he instead gives me a $20 bill, if it was through no fault or no deception on my part, but purely his mistake, that technically the letter of the law is that I don't have to return it to him. But Kiddush Hashem comes along and says that you should notify him of his mistake so that you can make a Kiddush Hashem. So when there's the Kiddush Hashem factor that changes the halacha, and when there's no Kiddush Hashem, you have options. You have the option of keeping it. Now, the vast majority of poskim say that whenever there's a tos akum, whenever there's a mistake made by a Gentile in your favor, you should always make the Kiddush Hashem whenever you can, and even go out of your way to make the Kiddush Hashem. However, it's important for us to know what your financial rights are, nonetheless, even though Kiddush Hashem comes along as an important consideration. I also want to point out that there's a whole slew of poskim who say that this halacha only applied to Gentiles who were antagonistic towards Jews. But if you live in a society where the Gentiles are not antagonistic towards Jews, and they are by large monotheistic Jew abiding or Jew loving people, so then these halachas don't apply, and you are not supposed to make any distinction between Jews and non-Jews. I want to make that point because, as you'll see, these halachas are composed at a time of great anti-Semitism, and as a result, there's an understanding that these are people who have exploited us, have persecuted us, have killed us, have exiled us, have denied us certain financial rights. And so put in that light, it is understandable why the halacha is not sympathetic towards the Gentile, okay? But in a more modern world where there's a tremendous amount of goodwill and equality shown to Jews in society, according to a whole slew of poskim, these distinctions between Jews and non-Jews fall away. Now, what does this have to do with the law that we're learning about shaliach, about using a proxy? Because what we've said up until now is if I send a proxy, or my employee for that matter, to go ahead and make a purchase or a sale on my behalf, so then when there is no fixed price and the proxy succeeds in getting more money than I was expecting, he's got to give all of that money for the sale to the person who dispatched him, to the party that dispatched him. We had said that in the event that the object does have a fixed price and the shaliach is able to get more than what the fixed price is, then the shaliach is entitled to half of that overpay. And that's where it's clear that the buyer, who's the third party, was aware of the overpay. And he said, I know that these are only $10 a piece, and you're selling 10 of them, so I should only give you $100, but I'm going to give you 110 nonetheless. So there, it's considered to be a gift, and we said that it's unclear to whom the gift is being directed. Is it being directed towards the seller, or is it being directed towards the shaliach? And since we're not sure, they split it. Okay? Now let's go to another case of ona'ah, of where the third party, let's say, is a seller. Okay? So let's say I send my proxy to go ahead and make a purchase on my behalf. And the proxy goes ahead and he purchases an item for far less than what it's worth. For far less than what it's worth. So I ended up getting from him 10 widgets when I only paid for 8 widgets. Okay, so I ended up getting a great deal. I ended up getting 10 widgets for the price of 8, which falls under the rubric of ona'ah. Normally, if the seller had made an error like that, if he was Jewish, then the shaliach would have a halachic obligation to notify the seller that you gave me too many widgets for the price that I'm paying. And only then, if the seller says, I'm aware of what I gave you, and it's fine, so then in that situation where it's clearly a gift, so then the shaliach would get to keep 1 widget, and he'd have to give 1 widget to his dispatcher. But in a situation where, so now we're going to talk about where the seller is a Gentile. So he says, so the Shulchan Aruch Harav states as follows: V'chein im nis'ana hamocher b'shivoy hamekach. But let's say the seller was not fully aware of the true value of the merchandise, and he sold it for far less than it was really worth. V'hu nachri she'ein tzarech lahachzir lo ona'asa. And he's not a Jew. And in that situation, I'm not obligated, if I was doing direct business with him, I would not be obligated to return or to pay him the true value, since he's the one who's making the error and is coming to market. Chayev litein hakol lahamishalech. So in that case, the shaliach has to give all of the merchandise, all of the widgets, to the dispatcher. Shaharei hanachri hayasavor shein hamekach shava yoser min hamaos shekibel v'nasan hakol lebaal hamaos. Because we're dealing with a case where the Gentile genuinely thinks that the amount that the buyer is paying is worth 10 widgets when really it's only worth 8 widgets. So in that situation, it's got nothing to do with the proxy. It's got to do with the amount of money that is being presented by the dispatcher and the amount of widgets that he's giving over. Because of that, all of the profit, all of the advantage goes to the person who laid out the money, which is the dispatcher. This had nothing to do with the shaliach, and therefore the shaliach gets to keep none of it. But that's only if the merchandise in question does not have a fixed price on the market. But let's say, what I can relate to is, let's say a person is buying collectibles. They have these TV shows now for people who go to, who buy antiques, right?
Antique Roadshow or something like that, I think.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of them, I think. Whenever I go to a motel and I turn on cable TV, it's like there's either cooking shows or buying antique shows, right?
And buying houses.
Buying houses and fixing them up, right? So let's say I go to someone's having a garage sale, and if there's a Jew and he's selling something of tremendous value, like the thing that I know is old comic books. Let's say he's selling the comic book that's on my wall, which even in bad condition would be worth several hundreds of dollars, because it's Action Comics number 50 from 1939, 1940, something like that. Okay, so if let's say he's selling a stack of comic books and I spy that, so if it's a Jew, I'm obligated to disclose to the Jew that, this is worth a huge amount of money. And this is the fair market value, or there's a fluctuating value, but you should know that it's not worth just a couple of bucks. It's worth probably in multiples of hundreds of that amount. If it's a non-Jew, I'm not obligated to disclose to him the true value. So therefore, if I send a shaliach to buy comic books at a garage sale, I tell him to go to the flea market and buy me all the comic books that he can find. And he comes back with the stuff that's worth far more. But there's no fixed price on these things because a lot of it is subjective. Then the shaliach has to give me all of the merchandise, and he's not entitled to, let's say, to share in the profits of the tremendous mitzvah that he found at the flea market. So that's where there's no fixed price. However, im yesh lo shar katsu v'yadua, but let's say there is a fixed price. It's widgets, it's not collectibles. V'hanachri ta'abo, and the Gentile made a mistake, and instead of giving me 8 widgets, he gave the shaliach 10 widgets. Kevin shemekabel ba'al hamos kitzvaso dayo. He says, then really, the buyer is only entitled to really 8 of those widgets because that's what he paid for, because it's a fixed market value. Ela shekeven shal yedei ma'osav ba'hana l'shaliach yiten lo hachetzi lisvara ha'achrona. He says, but since the shaliach was able to get an extra 2 widgets only because of the money that was given to him by the dispatcher, so then it's unclear who should really get those extra 2 widgets, and therefore they should split it. The buyer, the dispatcher, should get 1 widget, and the shaliach should get the other widget that was given to them erroneously above and beyond the monies that were paid. So that's in a situation where the seller is a Gentile, and you're allowed to therefore take more merchandise than you're paying for if he's willingly giving it to you. And in that situation, the shaliach and the dispatcher should split the extra amount of merchandise. Now you can understand that even in a situation where you would want to make a Kiddush Hashem, sometimes it's not possible. Let's say you go to a store and it's many miles away, and it's a negligible amount of things. Like I sent my son to buy $10 worth of nails at the hardware store, and he comes back with $15 worth of nails. So is it really because let's say the guy threw in an extra box or whatever it is there, you could argue that I could make a Kiddush Hashem if I call the store owner, but on the other hand, it may be too much of a burden for them at this point to have to deal with an extra box of nails. It's actually going to cost them more money to process the refund, the take back of that box of nails. And so therefore, in that situation, if I want to do the right thing, I should split that extra box of nails between myself and my son, who I sent to go buy the hardware. So that would be a typical example. Then the Rav Shulchan Aruch says like this: Aval im lo ta'a b'shivoy hamekach, ela b'mida o mishkal o minyan. But let's say the error was not made regarding the value of the widgets. Let's say the error was that the seller made a mistake, thought he was giving me 10 and ended up giving me 15 by accident, or it was being sold by weight, or it was being sold by volume, and he made a mistake in those areas. V'chein im sholcho limkor schorasa umachra lenachri v'ta hanachri b'cheshbon hamaos. Or let's talk. So in a situation where the error is made in measurement, not made in the value, but made in measurement. Or let's say, we'll give another illustration where the shaliach is going to have the advantage. Let's say I send my shaliach to go ahead and sell merchandise for me, and the Gentile makes a mistake, and even though the shaliach asked him for $10, he gave the shaliach a $20 bill. And the shaliach only recognizes it afterwards, after the exchange has been made. In that situation, ein sarach litin klum lamishaleach. In that situation, the shaliach does not have to give the extra $10 to his dispatcher. So in the following two cases, the shaliach gets to keep everything. Either when he's sent to purchase, let's say, 10 pounds of nails, and the guy accidentally gives him 15 pounds of nails, or the shaliach is sent to sell some merchandise, and the Gentile pays him what he thinks is the amount, but he actually accidentally gives him too much money. In those two examples, the shaliach can keep everything. And what's the reason for that? Shahatos b'cheshbon hu davar bifnei atzmo ve'eno shayach lemekach klal. He says, because for one very simple and very logical reason, the error that was made in our favor was not at all related to the merchandise. It was related to measurements, it was related to volume, it was related to an amount of money, but had nothing to do with a misrepresentation or a misunderstanding about the value of the merchandise. Everyone knows what the merchandise is worth, and it's got nothing to do with the merchandise that is either being bought or sold, and therefore it's not relatable back to the dispatcher. The error is in the favor now of the shaliach. Lefichach ein omrim bazeh al yedei ma'osav oscharaso shel mishalech ba'alo hana'azu. He says, and therefore, you can't say that since the shaliach only benefited through the money or the merchandise of the dispatcher, this error was made in his favor. No, here the error was made in his favor, independent of the merchandise that he was coming to buy or sell. It was an independent error, and therefore the shaliach gets to keep all of it. Shaharei, and the proof of this is Shaharei im hayarotza hayamachzu lenachri ta'uso kedei lekadesh Hashem. He says the proof is that the shaliach is fully in control of the situation, because the shaliach has the prerogative of making a kiddush Hashem if he so desires, and notifying the non-Jew of the error that was made in his favor. So since the fact that the shaliach has that prerogative to make the kiddush Hashem independently of the wishes of the dispatcher, that's an indicator that he also gets to keep any error in the event that he doesn't choose or doesn't have the opportunity to make a kiddush Hashem. So let's say I send my son all the way out to Barry to go to some specialized store where they're selling a certain product, and it turns out that the Gentile gave my son too many of the object that I had put out the money for him to buy. Instead of giving him 10 pounds, he gave him 15 pounds of that commodity. And it was a mistake purely made on volume or measurement or weight, not based upon the value of the commodity. In that situation, where let's say my son only discovers the error when he's back in town, it doesn't pay for him to schlep all the way back to make a kiddush Hashem. The question then it becomes, so who gets to keep that extra amount that was sold to us? The halacha is that in that situation, the shaliach, my son, will get to keep all of the extra that was given to us by accident, because it was an error not having to do with the value of the commodity, but an error that was independent of the value. Was an error, let's say the guy's scales were off, or he misread the scales, or whatever it is, and therefore the shaliach gets to keep everything. That's the vanilla halacha. It took us a while just to get through that entire text of that halacha, but we're going to now, in the next day or two, we're going to have to learn about how to qualify this. So what we'll do, Imrei Hashem, tomorrow is we'll review each step of this halacha. We'll go through each different case, and then we'll go into the Imrei Yaakov, and we'll break it down, and we'll talk a little bit more about Jewish, non-Jewish relations in the area of mercantile activity, and we'll try to get a little bit more clarity. Okay.
So, Rabbi, we can certainly leave this for tomorrow. I'm still a bit perplexed about the control that Shliach has, depending on whether it's the amount of items or the value of items. That doesn't seem like it's any different with respect to the Shliach's control to make a Kiddush Hashem or not. So I don't know whether the Rabbi can answer that tomorrow, but
yeah, I think we'll save that to tomorrow. But essentially, it's not the what the Rav Shulchan Aruch seems to imply is as follows: when there's an option to make a Kiddush Hashem, and it's at the discretion of the buyer, let's say, the Jewish buyer, to make a Kiddush Hashem or not to make a Kiddush Hashem, then it's not up to the Shaliach to make that decision unless it's a mistake that was made regarding something that's independent of the value of the merchandise. Then the Shaliach really should consult with his dispatcher first before making that unilateral decision to make the Kiddush Hashem.
The quantity is clear, but the value is perhaps less clear. Is that?
Well, no, right. In that case, it's an error of judgment as far as the value of the merchandise. There, he should go back to his dispatcher and say, "Listen, the guy gave me too much merchandise because he thought it was worth less than it's really worth. Is it okay for me to go back and make a Kiddush Hashem, or do you want to call him and notify him yourself?"
That's helpful.
That's the purview of between the buyer and the purchaser. But in a situation where the Gentile makes a mistake on measurements and volumes, so in that situation, the Shaliach has the unilateral right to make a judgment call on his own and say, "No, I should make a Kiddush Hashem here." Okay?
That's helpful. Thank you very much, Rabbi.
So have a
good day, gentlemen.
Have a great day, everybody.
Chodesh Tov.
Chodesh. If anyone's able to join us at the Shul Minyan at 7:15, we had a difficult time making Minyan yesterday. So if any of you can join us, it'll probably just be a very small Minyan, and we'll daven very quickly. So if anyone can come at 7:15 out to the Shul courtyard, we'd be very grateful. Have a great day, everyone.